We have nothing to fear for the future, except as we forget the way the Lord has led us in the past.
Welcome to Los Angeles, 1913, where a gush of water from Henry Mulholland's crazy dream will soon turn the desert into a thriving oasis of a city. If you're one of the thousands who arrive at the Santa Fe railway station across the river from Boyle Heights, you'll probably notice the new medical clinic on First Street, not because it's big or particularly impressive, but because it's free. It's been established to train doctors for the new Seventh-day Adventist Medical School in Loma Linda. The population around here is about to double, and the need for healthcare, good healthcare, is great. And if you stick around for the next 100 years, you'll discover that this humble clinic will become White Memorial Medical Center, a full-service hospital with a commitment to excellence, to medical education, and to its community that continues today, a full century later.
Our history is full of miracles. Miracles from a long time ago and miracles from yesterday.
The story of White Memorial isn't about new buildings or even momentous events, although there were plenty. Instead, it's about the people who shaped our history, people of faith and vision who felt the hand of God at work and pressed ahead against all obstacles. Like the pioneer who pushed a wheelbarrow filled with supplies to the little clinic on First Street. Like the man who bought an entire city block in Boyle Heights when he'd only been authorized to buy half of it. And like the visionary woman who believed that true healing meant taking care of the whole person and whose name we carry with pride.
Ellen White had a very powerful idea.
She had a vision of making men whole. Not just the physical, but the spiritual as well.
The vital link between spiritual, mental, and physical health was a concept Ellen White pioneered. And at a time when doctors could obtain their degrees in as little as 6 months, she championed a higher standard of medical training and healthcare excellence in America.
If Ellen White walked into the building today, I think she'd be thankful that her name is still on the hospital and that the hospital is still giving the kind of dedicated, loving care that she believed in.
In the light of today, the enduring legacy of White Memorial might seem almost inevitable, but in truth, the story nearly ended before it had really begun. Soon after its opening, the clinic on First Street proved woefully inadequate for the medical school's patient needs. Dr. McGann was asked to lead in the urgent quest to provide better clinical training in Los Angeles, but financial challenges stood in the way. Shortly after Ellen White's death, an emergency meeting was called to determine the future of the Loma Linda Medical School and whether to even proceed with the hospital project.
They were moving on minute by minute toward the time of the final vote when 4 ladies, not voting members of the organization, asked to enter the room where the conference was held and asked to be heard.
It was clear that the church was not going to be able to sustain the kind of medical school with the kind of clinical training that was needed and the kind of laboratories and all the other equipment that would be needed to really create this new kind of doctor. With the finances that they had. And so they were ready to give up on the medical school when the women stepped forward and said, let us try.
Representing the women of the denomination, we pledge a sum of $60,000 with which to construct a teaching hospital in the city of Los Angeles designed to provide clinical training for junior and senior medical students, said hospital to be named the Ellen G. White Memorial Hospital.
That first crisis narrowly averted. What had begun as a tiny clinic could now be called a hospital, and a large crowd gathered for its dedication.
My parents and I were among those that migrated from Loma Linda to Los Angeles for that occasion. And Dr. McGann was making one of his famous orations at the time of an earthquake, and there was one of the carpenters standing on the roof, and he shouted to the group and said, "Don't be excited, this is just an earthquake." And following that, things settled down and Dr. McGann finished his speech.
Though the 1918 building has long ago been replaced, all who pass through the front doors of 21st Century White Memorial are part of a rich historical legacy.
You know, something interesting about the new hospital is that its entrance is really pretty much exactly where the entrance of the old hospital was. And today, you know, the same people, the doctors, the nurses, the patients who are part of this incredible mission continue to walk through those doors.
Through these doors, the White Memorial mission to serve its community took shape as physicians made house calls and nurses volunteered their services to a city in need.
Nurses at the White Memorial Hospital, they banded together, and nurses from elsewhere, and they called themselves the Ellen White Nurses. And the hospital gave them free room and board, and the city paid their streetcar fares, and they would go out into homes and visit people during the Depression to try to give them medical care.
By the early 1930s, the White had already made a wide impact, not only in the local community, but around the world. The mission to serve when and wherever a need arose demanded that the hospital once again expand, a venture captured in a fundraising brochure the tireless Dr. McGann wrote himself. There has long been a deeply cherished plan in the hearts of a little group of men and women to erect a suitable building on the grounds of the White Memorial Hospital, adequate to care for the needs of the large clientele of suffering souls who entrust to us their lives during those hours when the shadows of the dark valley hover near. From its very beginnings, White Memorial has overcome obstacles time and again through the courageous and selfless actions of its people.
The hospital opened in April of 1918. This was the year of the most deadly international pandemic of all time, the 1918 flu epidemic. And so immediately the White Memorial Hospital is absolutely full of patients. The presence of the hospital was immediately known throughout the city because it was ready to serve when that deadly epidemic hit.
During the difficult Depression years of the 1930s, though the hospital and its employees struggled along with everyone else in America, they still reached out with acts of self-sacrifice and service. The 1940s brought a critical shortage of doctors and nurses, and with the 1950s came another challenge that threatened the hospital's future: the long-standing teaching partnership with Loma Linda Medical School. The one that had been the reason for the hospital's creation was also in serious jeopardy.
As the medical school proceeded in the 1940s and 50s, there developed considerable pressure from the accrediting organization, which was essentially the Council on Medical Education of the AMA, that the medical school should be united on one campus.
So they just had discussions, heated discussions. And actually, after many hours, they took an action to build a new hospital out of Loma Linda and move the total College of Medical Evangelists out there.
And so they took all the medical students and much of the faculty and transferred them to Loma Linda University. This was devastating to the White.
You know, I used to come to work in the morning and some employee that I was counting on had moved to Loma Linda and we had to replace them. But we all dug in and decided that the White Memorial was going to be a viable institution and we could make it on our own. And we did.
Along with the challenges came great opportunities, and the physical face of the campus was in constant motion throughout the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, with bold building projects and new services. But then came the 80s. White Memorial had repositioned itself from an academic teaching hospital to what was most needed, a community hospital with a strong teaching arm. Dedicated leaders and physicians kept medical education alive at the White, even after the loss of Loma Linda University training programs. But another storm was gathering, and the hospital's future was threatened.
In the 80s, the White looked like it was in financial trouble, and even again, there were rumors about closing the White.
We could not continue to lose money as fast as we were losing money and stay as a viable institution.
But with the Lord's help, a mighty miracle happened. The former head of the Medi-Cal program called me and said, "Frank, there's a bill going through the state legislature that only names county hospitals and public hospitals and university hospitals."
The challenge was, before it passed the Senate, was to get enough political influence to where we could be added in, being not-for-profit providers in a similar situation, to receive some of that additional federal funding.
And to make a long story short, through it all, when it came up for that change, it happened right at the nick of time.
Through receipt of the disproportionate share 855 monies, the White Memorial has been able to obviously reinvest in its market, reinvest in the institution, rebuild the new White Memorial campus that we have today.
Those funds really did preserve the hospital and preserve service to this community.
How do you thank the Lord for the answer to prayer like that?
Through it all, unshaken faith, steady leadership, and decisive action helped usher in one of the most exciting transitions in White Memorial history, the building of a new facility to serve this community.
Because of the vision of the executive team at the White Memorial and the commitment of the Adventist Health Corporate Board, the investing of hundreds of millions of dollars in rebuilding the White Memorial campus has really positioned the White Memorial well into the future.
At the start of our second century, we're grateful to the countless individuals who have dedicated their lives to making White Memorial the strong, vibrant institution it is today. And we celebrate a journey that has transformed it from mere survivor to a healthcare leader, educator, and innovator, and one of the finest hospitals in Los Angeles.
It's rare to find an organization that's been around 100 years, let alone an organization that has existed in service.
The 100th anniversary of this hospital in this community and this environment through all the struggles really represents the triumph of the values of the hospital.
It stands for a mission, it stands for a presence, it stands for values that aren't driven by a bottom line.
It's more than a hospital. It's a cause. It's a mission. It's planted in the community. It's reinvested in the community.
It has actually reached out to the community to expand its services and to help the community to be a healthy community. And that is something that I have always taken a great deal of pride in, and why I'm so supportive of White Memorial.
I cannot imagine how it would be without having White Memorial. White Memorial and the community is one.
The families that they've touched, the lives that they have changed, I will always be part of the White Memorial Hospital.
One of the great things that this centennial does for us is it causes us to pause and look back at our history. And when you do that, it gives you incredible confidence for the future in the next 100 years.
There's nothing to fear. There's hope for tomorrow. There's nothing to fear. Be the difference today. There's a purpose for being here. There's nothing to fear.
All of us are here for a season, but an institution keeps going on and going on and going on.
Never forget the reason we